If you're someone who spent a great deal of time sitting and you find yourself looking like this to stretch out your lower back, then odds are your hips and your lower back are stiff. Now, although you may not be experiencing pain, the feeling of tightness or stiffness is a sign that your body is uncomfortable. And I'm going to advise you as a physical therapist, the more you ignore these signs, the more likely you can expect to encounter random injuries that could have been prevented. Now today, I wanted to share with you the 5 stretches that can relieve low back tension and improve hip mobility. And the best part about this is I will provide 2 options for people so that regardless of what your flexibility looks like now, you will still be able to find an option that works for you. Let's get started with the first stretch, the child's pose. This is a common yoga position that I believe can have many benefits when it comes to spine health. This stretch is going to focus on providing a gentle distraction for the lower back while also opening up the upper back and the shoulder musculature. You will begin on all fours with your hands directly placed under your shoulders and your knees directly under your hips. Next, you're going to sit your hips back towards your heels by pushing your hands into the ground. You don't need to force the stretch, but rather imagine your hips sinking down on their own. Now, one trick I like to use here is to also add in a slight lean towards one side, which will allow you to isolate one side of the lower back at a time versus just the center. Take a couple deep breaths and attempt to hold this position for at least 30 to 60 seconds, 2 to 3 times on each side. Now, if getting on your knees is uncomfortable, you can perform option 2 by placing a small pillow underneath your knees and under your hips to provide more support. This can be just as effective and could be a great start for people. Next, we will move on to the lying Quadratus Lumborum stretch. This can be an easy move to implement into your morning routine right when you get out of bed. This stretch will focus on lengthening the large Quadratus Lumborum muscle on the backside, which often shortens and gets tight from all the sitting we're doing. This move will also start to incorporate some gentle hip movements. Start by lying on your back with your knees bent and feet flat on the floor. Cross one leg over the top of your knee and allow your knees to fall down to one side. You can also use your hand on the same side to add more intensity into this stretch. Make sure to try to keep your shoulders flat on the ground to prevent your entire body from rotating. You will hold this position for at least 30 to 60 seconds at a time, 2 to 3 times on each side. Some people may have difficulty crossing their legs, so option 2 can be performed with allowing your knees to fall down to each side while keeping both legs together the entire time. Moving on to the third exercise. This is the seated Quadratus Lumborum. When it comes to reducing back tension, sitting on the ground can be very beneficial to stretch out the hips. This stretch will focus on lengthening one side of the entire body while incorporating some overhead shoulder mobility. You will begin by sitting with your legs crossed. Slowly lean your body sideways towards one side while reaching the opposite arm overhead. You can use the other arm to support yourself and to control how far you want to go. Ensure that you go slow and controlled while still breathing through the movement. You will hold this position for 30 to 60 seconds at a time for 2 to 3 times on each side. Sitting with your legs crossed can be difficult for some, so option 2 can be done sitting in a chair. Just as in the previous example, lean over towards the side while reaching the opposite arm overhead. You can use the other arm to stabilize yourself on the chair. Moving on to the half kneeling hip flexor stretch. This will focus on opening up the hip flexors in the front of the hip and lengthening one side of the lower back muscles. You will begin in a half kneeling position with one knee bent in front of your body. Start by tightening your abdominals to tilt your pelvis backward and gently shift your hips forward. Then slowly raise your opposite arm overhead, allowing your trunk to lean towards the front leg. Hold this position for 30 to 60 seconds for 2 to 3 times on each side. Make sure to keep adequate spacing between both legs to maintain your balance while performing this stretch. Now, if kneeling feels uncomfortable on your knees, you can either place a pillow or a foam pad underneath the knee, or also perform option 2 by standing on a step. For option 2, you can start by placing one foot on a step in front of you and shifting your hips forward. Just as in the previous exercise, make sure to tighten your abdominals to tilt your pelvis backward. Now, the last exercise we will go over is the happy baby stretch. This is great for decompressing your lower spine and for stretching out the pelvic floor and inner thigh musculature. Begin by lying on your back with your legs bent and feet resting on the floor. Lift both legs off the floor with your knees bent and grab the inner arches of both feet. Gently allow your legs to fall outward, allowing your pelvis to open up. Focus on taking slow, deep breaths to help all of the muscles of the lower back and pelvis relax. If you are unable to grab your feet, you can also perform option 2 by lifting both legs off the floor with your knees bent and grabbing your knees. As the previous option, allow your legs to fall outward and try to relax all the pelvic and lower back muscles. Now, when it comes to mobility, progress doesn't happen overnight. But in time, with consistency and spending the time in these positions, you will begin to notice that the small changes could have significant benefits on keeping your hips and low back healthy. Make sure to save this routine to refer back to later. And let me know in the comment section below on which one of these exercises was your favorite. Now, if you want to learn how to get rid of back pain for good, you must understand that working on your hip mobility and strengthening your glutes will be critical. Check out these 2 videos here where I go over how you can do this. Until next time, I'll see you in the next one.